my biggest question to you is why is it such a great investment? Why is it such a hot investment today?
Hmm.
Like, why are so many people interested? For me, it seems like the government contract just gives it some credibility, some legitimacy. Um, but I don't believe I have done as much research as you as far as the fundamentals. So it seems like there is a lot of interest, and I can tell that there's a lot of bullish price action and momentum.
Hmm.
But my question to you is, what is causing that momentum as far as why are so many people interested in it?
Yeah, it's interesting, and it does have a degree of social phenomenon, I would say, especially in this day and age of meme stock. I'm not calling Palantir a meme stock by any means, but of course, I think that there is a certain degree of I think people online are very excited about it. There is a certain kind of with in a similar way to Tesla, although maybe not so much now. Obviously, Musk's popularity maybe has taken a couple of hits, but people really like the CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp. That is definitely something behind that. And then I think, obviously, what they do just really lends itself to that growth story and that kind of AI narrative. And I'm no expert on AI. Obviously, I've done a lot of research as an investor. And I do my best to understand it. And it is true that I think if you look at the earnings call, it does seem to be like there is something in the Palantir offerings that maybe is really kind of separating it from some of the other participants. And I wanted to once again share the screen because I have covered it a lot. So I just wanted to maybe go back to some of the work I did previously on Palantir. For example, this one was basically on just after earnings came out, and I actually called it the defense buy of the century. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I really like this stock. Obviously, earnings came out. Just a quick recap. It is obviously looking in terms of their trajectory, it's looking quite good now. Definitely, there was some questions back in 2021 about their profitability. We've seen that grow nicely. We've seen the net income come up. We've seen that really strong growth in US commercial revenue growth. And even government growth is still growing at a healthy clip. And of course, perhaps the most interesting thing is, basically that product, they have the AIP, right? And this is kind of what sets it apart from, has been setting it apart, I think, in terms of their offering to some of their competitors, right? So, and you can see this reflected in the earnings call. I'll just read out this quote by Karp, I believe it was. He says, "As far as I can tell, we're really the only company to figure it out how to help our customers get beyond chat, leveraging the investments that we've made into ontology, really harnessing this pattern of implementation where you're taking unstructured inputs and turning them into structured actions and outputs that drive economic value in the enterprise." Right. So I do think that, and the key thing here is the ontology. That's something that they talk a lot about. The best way to explain it in layman's term is, that Palantir software, whether it be either of its platforms, the commercial or the government one, it kind of structures all the data into it kind of basically turns the company and its data into a digital asset, right? It kind of structures all that into different digital, I guess, assets, you might call them, which then, through their AI can be called upon and referenced, and that is something that I think isn't implemented in other forms of AI, right? Where a company can say, okay, here's an AI, but where's all the input? Like you need that information to be created, and that is kind of where the ontology for where the ontology comes in and why AIP is so important, and that is definitely, I think, something very bullish. And then overall, I think we've had some other pretty interesting reasons to be bullish. And now going into a bit more specifics, I wrote this one. This piece is on my Substack. I talked about the NHS deal, a huge deal, of course. I mean, obviously in the UK, where my family's originally from, the NHS is basically where everyone gets their healthcare from. It's a public healthcare system, and of course, Palantir scored a pretty big contract. Not that huge, really, in terms of everything, but pretty significant, just in terms of the idea that how Palantir can help not just the US government, but also a lot of the governments around the world to basically optimize their data and basically introduce AI into their kind of workings, right? Similarly, we had the Titan contract, which was not awarded yet when I wrote this. It has been awarded. I believe they are now working on a prototype for this Titan contract, right, which is the US Tactical Intelligence Targeting Access Node, basically a battle management system. And anyway, basically, again, another very significant contract, which could be looking at an investment of around 1.5 billion from the military into this kind of technology, right? And then just as a kind of just to kind of wrap that up, it is also interesting that given that that Palantir has increased its profitability, it is now eligible to be included in the S&P 500. So that has also led to a little bit of speculation. Of course, when that happens, we usually get that S&P effect, where most of the stocks, obviously because of funds having to rebalance their portfolio, they see a nice little bump in their stock price. So just another interesting fact there about Palantir. But overall, I just think that, again, I think that technology really, if you really understand the fundamentals of it, which again I've tried to do as much. I'm probably not doing it justice, and there's probably people better able to. But I've done good work at it, and listened to a few podcasts on it, and it really does seem like it's at the moment it's doing something that can't be done by a lot of other competitors, and it really lends itself, again, not just to obviously to the government, which from a fundamental perspective, I've also talked a lot about the importance now, especially in this world of heightened geopolitical tensions. I think that obviously spending in defense is going to really increase. I mean, obviously, that's an important part of Palantir's revenues, and then obviously that also applies to the commercial revenue growth, which I think we're really seeing accelerate in the US. And again, my hope is that can be translated into other countries, right, and internationally. And that's kind of why I'm excited about the NHS deal and kind of Palantir starting to make a name for itself. Obviously it has that deal with the UK. It has some. It's doing some work with Israel. I believe they were also hired recently, have some kind of a contract with the Ukraine. So again, just very, very interesting, and just a ton of potential in this technology, again, both from the commercial sector and the government sector. So that's really why I think it's a pretty exciting stock.
So you made a lot of points there. Let me go one at a time. We were very bummed when we saw that Palantir didn't make the S&P 500. A lot of people were hoping that would happen last quarter.
Yeah.
But I do think, the stock did manage to rally despite being included in the S&P. So this could be, in hindsight, very positive if it gets included next quarter and then rally some more. I think the international growth and connections is very important to me. One of the stocks that's very hot right now is Novavax. They have a lot of international connections, and a lot of people were saying Novavax is going bankrupt, but I had a lot of faith in Novavax recovering. If you were to look at the Novavax stock, it was trading at $280 three times in the past. It dropped as low as $3, about $3.90. But we still had faith, and I was still bullish on Novavax despite a bunch of bad news. They had a lawsuit that was bigger than their market cap, and so everybody had a lot of fear. But one of the things that gave me a lot of hope in Novavax is their global connections. I think it's very important, especially with government funding. It just, with those stocks, you'll just randomly get a big government contract and have a huge spike. So I think with Palantir, it's been riding those waves right now. I do think there will be times where it will experience times like Novavax, where everything feels like, they're not getting any deals and a lot of bad news is coming out. But I do think Palantir is very hot right now. It's riding the wave. I do see a lot of growth potential, at least above previous all-time highs. I think one of the common trends right now is, like, in my opinion, Palantir is overvalued at its current stock price, and a lot of tech stocks are overvalued, but investors don't care. They're just willing to invest in the future. They're willing to pay that premium today for what it can be in the future. And that's
Mhm.
just what I see with a lot of stocks right now, with, crazy high PE ratios, especially with ARM Holdings. I think the PE ratio was as high as 1,200, which is insane. But
Mhm.
ARM Holdings has investments from Nvidia. They have big plans in the next few years, so investors are willing to pay that price today. And I think we are seeing something similar with Palantir, uh, but I do think it will go higher. I am curious to see, how many more government contracts Palantir receives, but it does seem like really a gift for the stock market right now. I think a low risk investment that has growth potential,
Mhm.
especially when you have that confidence in government contracts and all the other things we discussed. But I'm excited to see what happens. Uh, Before this meeting, me and you talked about the potential for $100 stock price in the future. I think we could see that. But with Palantir, are you more interested in just buying and holding? Are you not selling anything? Are you trading it? What's your approach?
Well, in my opinion, I think I'm pretty bullish long term, but again, I also like to look at, like you said, valuation, and I do a fair bit of technical analysis. I like to use stuff like Fibonacci extensions to get an idea of potential targets. So, I have a position, but I'm happy to sell out most of my position, I think, if we reach certain levels. I mean, right now, I think the way we're sitting now, I think we're forming a good base. And of course, I think once we break out of kind of this range from about $28, I do think we could definitely obviously see new highs, and obviously with no resistance above. Yeah, I'm also looking at somewhere around the maybe $90 mark as a potential place where I would be, especially if this happened, in reasonably quickly, which again, people think it may be, people may think that's outrageous, but we got to remember, right, back in February 2021, little after its IPO, Palantir was trading at about $44, so this isn't something outrageous, so again, it kind of depends on how fast we get there, and also what the technicals tell me, and of course what the valuation is at that point, and what we've seen on the next few earnings. But yeah, I mean, I do a bit of both. So I think I'll always keep a kind of a bit like I do with Bitcoin. I would always keep a bit of a core position in the stock, but again, happy to sell some off definitely if we rally pretty strongly from here, in my opinion.
Okay. I feel like we have a lot of similar thought processes, especially from the last time we talked. I take a similar approach. I have an account where I hold, and I have an account where I trade. So I kind of get the best of both worlds. But Palantir is definitely one that I would hold long term as well.